Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumais, Perek Yud Aleph, Halacha Aleph, and Halacha Beis. We are learning today Daf Tzadik Tes. We're starting all the way on top of the Amid. Quickly recapping that the Gemara on Daf Tzadik Ches Amid Beis brought a brisa in which we have a machlokes Tanoim. Rabbi is the one that says, as we learned in the Mishnah, that one is allowed to put Truma wine into Murias. And as we explained in the Mishnah, because Rabbi holds that the wine is being put in there not only to neutralize a fishy or a bad odor, more than that, the wine is being put in there for a positive reason, because we want to add the taste of wine into the murias. That is not considered something destructive or disrespectful to the truma. Don't forget, the wine remains in there. Of course, only kohanim can eat the murias. That's not the topic. The point is that one is allowed to do it. However, in the Braisa, we brought the other Tana, Rabbi ben Rab Shimon, that holds that you're not allowed to put truma wine into murias. And as we explained, the reason is Rabbi ben Rab Shimon understands that the main purpose for putting wine into murias is to neutralize the bad odor or the bad flavor or the fishiness of the fish brine. And truma is something that's holy and included, imbued in the mitzvah saseh of mishmeres turumoisai, that a kohen has to safeguard. Safeguard means you can't destroy it, you can't disrespect it, or you can't downgrade its use. And wine is made to be enjoyed, not only to neutralize an odor, and therefore you're not allowed to do it. Atkan de Braisa. Then the Gemara had a gavaldik echab, that ironically, because of the chumrah of Rabbi ben Rab Shimon, a tremendous leniency will come out only according to him, which is that if someone wrongfully added wine into murias, since it's only lahaver zuhama, so the wine didn't enhance the fish flavor, it just took away something bad. On the other hand, for sure, the fish brine downgraded, or ruined the taste of the wine. Now, if you would be allowed to put the wine in there, and if we see the wine as something that's adding benefit, then it would be usher, like we just mentioned, for a non-kohen to consume the fish brine. But dafka Rabbi ben Rab Shimon that says you're not allowed to put it in there because you are ruining the wine. Okay, but once the wine is ruined, then adarabba, then a zar will be allowed to have the murias. And no, we're not debating that. That's a given. The question that we had is that we know from Masechtas Avodah Zarah that a Jew is not allowed to buy murias that was made by goyim, and the understanding we had in Masechtas Avodah Zarah, it's because there was a chashash that maybe the goy added wine into the murias, and the problem is that the wine of a goy has the status of yayin nesach / yayin stam, which is asur doiraisa or the rabbanan, even bahana. Now, according to Rabbi ben Rab Shimon, just like he holds that since the wine got ruined post facto, yayin of truma in the murias will allow us a zar to eat the murias. Well, why would it be prohibited to have the murias, even if there is yayin nesach or yayin stam? Once it was put in there, the wine got ruined. So Rabbi Yirmiyah, that's where we left off, answered that you misunderstood the whole din in Masechtas Avodah Zarah. It's not because of yayin nesach, it's because of bishulei goyim. Now, we never knew that you have to cook murias, but that's what we're saying right now, that that murias is cooked, and therefore forget about wine, even if without wine. Bishul akum is something that's asur midrabanan chevra. We know there are three basic qualifications. All three are needed for it to be prohibited. Michal, number one, that the item cooked cannot be an item that could have been consumed raw. If something could be consumed raw, even though it was cooked by a goy, a Jew is allowed to have it. Number two, it has to be something considered chashuv, that's very difficult to define, or something that's oila al shulchan melachim, something that would be served at a banquet that a president would give. If it's something insignificant, even if it cannot be consumed raw, even though it was cooked from the beginning until the end by a goy, a Jew is allowed to consume it. And the final is that the prohibition is only if a goy was involved in all of the steps of its making. If you had a Jew involved, according to the Ashkenazim, even by only opening up the fire, according to the Sfardim, by being involved even by stirring the pot once, but directly connected to the pot once in the beginning or at the end, then again, it won't be prohibited. Okay, so Bekitzer, that was where we left off. The Gemara now will refute Rabbi Yirmiyah. Remember the Hemshech, the Hagdama. The Gemara is going to prove that the issue by Murias of a goy is not bishul related. Actually, we're going to establish, that if the Murias was cooked, of course it's bishul lakum. We're not going to debate that. But not all Muriases are cooked. And the isur that the Chachamim gave for a Jew to consume Murias of a goy is even when we know it was not cooked. And the only reason for that will be because of Yayin Nesach. And basically, we're going to differentiate between Truma, which is only Asur B'Achila, versus Avodah Zarah related Isurim, which also make that item Asur B'Hana'ah. And that's why, as we'll speak it out, there is no contradiction to begin with. Now, the final topic we had on Halacha Aleph was, according to our Girsa, was the Tanakama that is saying that you're not allowed to cook wine of Truma, period. Mepnei shehu mematoi. We said we'll have to explain what does that mean, mematoi. In our version, Rabbi Yehuda is the Tana that says that you are allowed to cook yayin of Truma because mepnei shehu mashbichoi, it improves it somehow. And we're going to just remind ourselves that we had earlier in the Masechta, we had a machlekes between Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Lazar because of another din that we learned there. We'll repeat it when we learn it inside. According to Rabbi Yechanan, we have to invert the girsa of our Mishnah. We'll see Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says ein mevashlin b'yayin shel truma, and the Chachamim actually will hold that you may, as we'll learn the conclusion of Halacha Aleph. Now Halacha Beis, Nachan Tzadik Tes Amud Aleph, we'll have in the Mishnah a machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua regarding the status of fruit juices that were rendered truma. Either the person separated fruit as truma, and then you extract the juices. We want to know whether the status of truma is on the juice. We already mentioned that according to some, we're going to view that as zeya ba'alma. Perhaps there is no kedusha of truma on there at all, or only rabbinic, or on a lower level. Or the Mishnah is also talking about someone did not separate truma on the fruit. They already turned the fruit into juice. Now they wake up, and now they separated truma lechatchila on fruit juice. Either or, machlokes Rabbi Eliezer will hold that those juices are truma. Rabbi Yeshua will hold that those juices are not truma. Really, they're debating only regarding if a zor ate it, does he have to pay a chaimish or not? Rabbi Eliezer says that he has to pay the keren and the chaimish. Rabbi Yeshua says he doesn't have to pay. We'll see, doesn't mean he doesn't have to pay anything, or doesn't mean he only doesn't have to pay the chaimish. And the Mishnah will have another machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua concerning any juice other than the 7 liquids that are remembered through Yad, Shach, Dam, Nemanik, whether they can become tamei. Vadai, only the 7 liquids can make other foods susceptible to becoming tamei. But whether if a mashke itself could become tamei, and if it does, obviously, then it would also convey tuma. That is a machlokes. Rabbi Eliezer says, only the 7 liquids could render something else susceptible, but all of the liquids are dinoi kamayim or mashke, and they can become tamei. Rabbi Yeshua holds only the 7 liquids can become tamei to begin with. We're going to really have an application of something that we on occasion learn. The words are, we'll explain it when we learn the Gemara. Whether we say doin mina umina, or whether we say doin mina v'oike ba'asra. That will be the underlying machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Bikurim vadai, by bikurim applies to liquids, all fruit juices. We do have a hekesh between truma and bikurim. So there is a comparison. How far do we take it? That's the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. And ultimately, in the Gemara, we're going to have a braisa that's going to bring you a machlokes tanoim in the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer. We're going to have Rab Nosson, the Tana Rab Nosson, that says that according to Rabbi Eliezer, that says that fruit juices are truma. It's only because of maras ayin. It's not really truma, as we'll see it inside. Our Mishnah certainly does not follow Rabbi Nosson. Our Mishnah that says that if a non-kohen consumes fruit juices of truma, their chayiv keren v'chaimish, is not following Rab Nosson, but Rab Nosson has a different misoira of the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer. This is today's daf. Let's hit it. It's packed. Daf Tzadik Tes, starting all the way in the top. So Rabbi Yirmiyah, that was explaining why even according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Rab Shimon, one will not be allowed to consume murias made by a goy, even though we're going on the premise that even if yayin nesach was put in there, because of it only being placed in there to take away the bad odor. So the yayin is not adding positive, it's just removing a negative. And on the other direction, the murias ruins the taste of the wine, which is taka why you're not allowed to put the yayin of truma and murias, you're ruining it. But once it's ruined, it's ruined. So it can't be because of yayin nesach issue, even though a Jew is not allowed to have yayin nesach, not even yayin stam, but once it's already put in the murias, the wine is ruined. So the issue cannot be because of yayin stam. The issue has to be because of bishul laku. The Gemara says it can be. We got a braisa. Now the braisa is speaking about professional people making fish sauce. And interestingly, just to know the way it worked, I'm not talking about cooking or not cooking was optional. Everyone had the option to cook it or not to cook it. However, the reason why people added wine in the fish sauce, that is only because the quality of the innards of the fish that they were using for the brine was of an inferior quality. That's why they needed to add the wine. Whoever made fish sauce from innards that are kedasu kedin, they would never add wine. Let's go with that fact. So the Baraisa says, and that's the girsa we're going to use, that uman means a professional. A professional, says the Marafulda, is someone that will never place wine inside the murias because he uses high quality fish fats. So over there, and a chanami, you can buy it from a goy. Only the she'eno uman, if he's not a professional, that's what the Baraisa says, then a Jew is not allowed to buy and consume murias from a goy. Now, one thing is clear, guys. If the murias was cooked, even if it was made by a professional, of course, bishul lakum is prohibited. Which means that when the Rabbi Yosi, the Tana in the Braisa, differentiates between a higher grade fish brine that doesn't need wine, doesn't have wine, lower grade, he's vadai only talking about fish brine that's not cooked. If it's cooked, everything will be yasser. And yet, even though it's not cooked, if wine was added, you're not allowed to have it. You can't say because of bishul lakum. They refuted it. Now, says the Gemara, Uman, when Rabbi Yosi says that if a professional made it, high quality was used, and therefore a Jew is mutter. Now, you have to know how to read this. Law, she'eno mavushal. Law means not no, yes, for sure, it's because it wasn't cooked. Because if it was cooked, no one holds that murias is excluded from the isur of bishul lakum. So in other words, we're speaking about fish brine that was not cooked. And yet, Rabbi Yossi differentiates. If there is no wine, you're allowed to have it. Udekavase, but the non-cooked murias, v'she'einoi uman, that was not made by the professional, which means that it was not such a high quality fish brine. So therefore, you added wine in it. That's going to be usher. So you see, it's usher v'afilu she'eina mavushal. You can't tell me that the issue of murias is bishul lakum. It's not true. If it was cooked, of course, it's another problem. But there is an issue only because of the wine. Now, before we go to resolve the issue, we just want to make something clear. When you are telling me that no wine was placed because it was made by a professional, halachically, you have to be certain that it was made by a uman. This is not a presumption that you can make. In other words, when it comes to murias, the presumption stam is wine was added. When Rabbi Yossi is giving you this leniency, it's only when you knew. No, it's V'amar Rabbi Yochanan bar Meroya. That's not the normal Rabbi Yochanan. That's a different Amoira. That's not going to be. That's not related to the question or to the answer. He just wants to clarify that Vafilu command Omar Uman Mutar. That even according to Rabbi Yossi, you don't be careful with this heter. You know when you can say, since an uman made it, no wine was added, ubulvad v'yoideya. It has to be where you know. Or you add ketchup to food because the food is not so good. I'm not talking about Americans. I'm talking about other people. If you know it's a good steak, you're not going to add anything to it. You'll eat it the way it is. But you have to know that it's good. Okay. Point is, we refuted the answer of Rabbi Yirmiyah. So the Gemara gives a new answer. And the new answer is, Hada Amar. You know why we say, Emes, that according to Rabbi Lazar ben Rab Shimon, if Truma was added into Murias, according to Rabbi Lazar ben Rab Shimon, a non-kohen is allowed to eat it. You know why? Because the wine got ruined because of the fish brine. So even if you would be able just to extract the wine, it would not be drinkable. It would have a taste of fish in it. No one likes that. Since the isur of eating truma is an isur of achila, and it's no longer edible, so it lost the status of yayin, which is why, a non-kohen can have it. But when it comes to yayin stam, not only yayin nesach, even yayin stam is also asur bahana, guys. The issue is not only isur achila, it's isur hana. So I'll give you just an example. If I add yayin nesach, or the goyish wine from the market, into fish brine, so the fish brine had the volume of 1 liter, and now it has 1 liter, 1.1. Why 1.1? Because it has the wine in it. Even if the wine is not edible, I got more murias. If you're going to consume it, you're benefiting by the fact that there's more volume. You're getting hana from it. That's why it's asur. The gavaldik answer. Hanas, but hanas truma is mutter. Truma is only asur b'achila. It's mutter b'hana. Hanas avodah zarah is asura. That's why, even according to Rabbi Lazar ben Rab Shimon, even if there is no issue of bishul akum, beautiful. Nevertheless, murias that was made by a goy without being cooked, yes, having wine added, will be an item that a Jew will not be allowed to eat because of yayin stam, even though the wine is ruined, because you're having hana by the added volume. Okay. Final topic of the Mishnah is the source, I want you to know, of a machlokes today between various poskim. Generally a machlokes between Rabbanei Chutz La'aretz and Rabbanei Eretz Yisrael, whether you can qualify wines that were pasteurized in pipes as yayin mevushal, or it's still yayin she'ena mevushal. This is very consequential, at least for Jews that live in Chutz La'aretz, that we have non-Jewish help in the house. Yayin she'ena mevushal, that's moved by a goy, becomes asur. So therefore, many of us don't do the ideal of making kiddush and avdallah on yayin she'ena mevushal, which is ideal. According to some poskim, essential. According to some poskim, you can't make kiddush on a wine that you can't put on the mizbeach. On the mizbeach, you cannot put yayin mevushal. These are big topics. I know the Rashba is the one that says that no, that even yayin mevushal is good for kiddush. We rely on that. The Alter Rebbe says lachatchila make it a yayin she'ena mevushal. I know why we rely on that. Not because we don't care. We care. We want to do things mahadrin, and what difference is there? And yayin she'ena mevushal is better. Not for me, I'm not the maven, but I'm looking at many people that will say that they can taste the difference. I don't know if they mean it or not. They say that. And why? Because I don't want my shiksa to make it not kosher without me even knowing. She'll move the bottle. And I want you to know that what makes the wine mevushal in America? The fact that it was pasteurized. You should know that in Israel, it's also pasteurized. I don't know exactly, the temperature is very, very relevant, because they want to pasteurize it, but they don't want to kill the living parts in the wine for the wine to have the benefit that it's still a living and ain't a mavushal. So that's a big machlokes, whether it's called mavushal or not. I know that the criteria or the standard here and there, here meaning in LA and there in the Holy Land, is not the same. In other words, it's very common that the same exact procedure happened to the wine, but in Israel, it's going to be bottled as Eina Mavushal, and here it's going to be bottled as Mavushal. And we're going to get to this from our Gemara. Let's come back to the Mishnah. So in the Mishnah, we had a very simple machlokes, whether you can cook wine, yayin of Truma. And we quoted this, I think on Daf Chafei, we quoted this early on in the Masechta. The way our Mishnah records Machlokes Tanakama / Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda is that the Chachamim were the ones that were machmer. I'll tell you the words. Ein mevashal yayin shel truma bepnei shehu ma'mitoi. Ma'mitoi means two things. Guys, this is important. Either or. That's the whole sugya. Either because it evaporates, so you're not allowed to ruin truma. If you cook it, you make it less. You're not allowed to do that. And on that, Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you make it better. How do you make it better? It lasts longer. That's what the Marafulda says. No, it's why would people cook it? I gave a reason because you have a shiksa in the house. The other reason would be if it's too hot, we can shut off the heater. Why could you do it? Even though you lose some of it evaporates, you lose some of the quantity, it's going to last longer. Yayin Yashan Noishan, remember that? So remember, Yakir, Yayin is from this year. Old wine is 1 year old. Noishan is 2 years old. Wines in those days didn't last as long as they last today. Maybe because we have bottles, we have the corks, we have a lot of stuff that no one had then. No, it's when you cook it, it lasts longer. That's one way of understanding. The other way of understanding it is no. Mam'itoi means is that you actually make the quality inferior. It's not about evaporation. Some people will only drink yayin that's neina mavushal. Not me. I wouldn't know the difference. Is that true, Aaron? Yayin sheina mavushal is better wine, no? Always better wine. So, is it about quantity or is it about quality? That's the question. So says the Gemara that there's a machlekes with Amayroim. Exactly what's the reason? And we forgot who said what, but we know who said. Who are the sayers? Who are the players? Kaviyachal. Rabbi Lazar, the real players. Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yechanan. One of the two. The reason why the Chachamim in our version say you can't cook wine, not because you degrade the quality. It's not about quality. It's about quantity. In other words, some of it gets evaporated. The Torah says, again, you got to safeguard it. You can't let it go to waste. It's going to waste. The other one of these two Amayroim say, no. That you will decrease, you will reduce the number of people that were drinking it. Less people drink cooked wine. Either, sometimes, I'm saying the words of the Rishonim, that cooked wine becomes too strong, or like we said, cooked wine becomes inferior in taste. There's some added better taste, dafka, because it's not cooked. Someone also told me that wine that's not cooked keeps on getting better. It's like the wine until when it gets worse. Like us, we get better and then we get worse, but it's a living thing. And once it's cooked, it's like a corpse. It's dead. It is what it is. Okay, like a skeleton. The corpse also goes down, don't worry. But at some point, I think we just stay on the same madrega. Okay, now, B'chlal, Rabbi Lazar and Rabbi Yechanan, I'm going with what I understand. We paskin like Rabbi Yechanan. So the way the Yerushalmi will ask, what's the halacha? We're basically asking who said what. And we forgot initially. So the Gemara says, V'lo yodin, we forgot, man amar do, who said what? But I will know, I'll extrapolate then who said what. And this is a topic we had on Daf Chafei. Now let me just remind everyone, on Daf Chafei, we were speaking about someone who wants to designate cooked wine as truma for cooked wine and uncooked wine. Rabbi Yehuda, according to the version that we have on Daf Chafei, Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says you're not allowed to do that. Because since cooked wine is less palatable, it's inferior, you can't give to the kohen, you're cheating the kohen. Okay? Like you have to be toidim min hayaf, you can't do min hayaf. I got a problem with that. What's the problem? It's a stira. Rabbi Yehuda says over here, according to our version, that you are allowed to cook yain shel truma wine mipnei shehu mashbichai. You're making it better. Well, if Rabbi Yehuda says here you're making it better, if cooked wine is better, then why would you not be allowed to separate truma from mevushal and ein mevushal? Like great stira. That's a stira. So Rabbi Yechanan was the one that said the stira is such a problem. Rabbi Yechanan changed the version in our Mishnah. In order for both Rabbi Yehudas to work the same, he had in our Mishnah, the Chachamim say, you can cook the yayin shel truma, mepnei shu mashbichai. In our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, no, you can't cook it, mepnei shu mam'itoi. Now they are saying the same thing. So, since Rabbi Yechanan resolved the contradiction, by doing something that we try not to do, by saying Mechalfa Shitasi de Rabbi Yehuda, that Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim here, you got it recorded in opposite directions. He's changing the Shita over here. And Rabbi Lazar is the one that says that Eina Muchlefes. Now, let's first explain how does Rabbi Lazar get away with that. So he says a Gavaldik thing. He says, who would be the one cooking the wine? The owner. Then Yisrael should not cook the wine. Let's leave the gears to the way it is. Rabbi Yehuda says you can cook wine. Who's the you that can cook wine? A kohen has the right to make that choice. What happens when you cook wine? You downgrade the quality. I'll say everything. You make it evaporate, but it's going to last longer. A kohen, he's the owner. If the kohen says, I don't need the wine now, I need the wine for 2 years from now, and to preserve it, I'm going to cook it, he has the right to do it. For him, it's a subjective shvach. Over there, the Mishnah is speaking about the owner. The owner, the Yisrael is separating truma. Generally, that's the way Rabbi Lazar resolves it. Generally, cooked wine is inferior. You can't separate inferior for superior. So that's the answer of Rabbi Lazar. Kamon b'koyin v'kam b'ba'alim. So now, it's easy to chap who says what now. Let's go. It's simple. I'm going to go with Rabbi Yochanan. The fact, think, Rabbi Yochanan was the one that says that these two Mishnayos are the same. And I can tell you right now that it can be that Rabbi Yochanan disallows you to cook it because it evaporates. If that's the only problem with cooking it, I'll tell you why it can be. Because that's only a reason for you not to be allowed to cook it. But once it already evaporated, if the quality is considered the same, you still have, why would he say you can't separate it? Gavalik. No, okay, so he changes Rabbi Yehuda here, but he's still correlating them. Just like Rabbi Yehuda says you can't cook the wine, that's why Rabbi Yehuda says you can't separate mevushal and ena mevushal. If the only issue is because it evaporates, Gavalik. But I'm not allowed to do it because I'm not allowed to ruin it. But once I did it, now I have cooked wine. Now, why can't I use that 2%? I'm going to give the right amount of truma. It must be because Rabbi Yochanan understands that the reason why Rabbi Yehuda says you can't cook it according to his version is because you downgrade the quality. And now it's the same. If I downgrade the quality, I'm not allowed to ruin even if I'm a kohen, I'm not allowed to ruin the truma. I cannot downgrade the quality. And once the quality was downgraded, I can't use an item that has a lower quality to be truma for something of a higher quality. It goes together. So now we know what Rabbi Yochanan says. So Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says, it's not only about evaporation. Could be that also. But it's also about that you're diminishing the amount of people that will drink it because less people will drink yayin mevushal. And according to Rabbi Lazar, what's the issue? The issue is only evaporation. This, like I mentioned in Shulchan Aruch here today, for people who learn smicha, we don't learn this. But from Siman Kuf Chav Gimel and many simanim, it's all about yayin nesach and yayin of a goy, which is very relevant today. I know today we have a gavaldik, a kosher market of wine, but people who don't know, they're shocked. They're saying wine is wine. Like what? There's no ingredient that's not kosher. And when it says in Shulchan Aruch that if a goy even only moves wine, he makes the wine prohibited for us to consume. But that's only a yain she'ena mevushal. This is a din in Shulchan Aruch. So when the Shulchan Aruch speaks about bishul, the shach adds the words, bishul means evaporation. That's the way the shach defines the meaning of bishul. Now the pasteurization happens in pipes, and none of it is evaporated. And that's the source, I can say, of Rav Moshe Feinstein. Nowadays, the Rosh Yeshiva of YU, a giant, these are the poskim today that say that if the wine, I take it back. The ones on this side is Rav Shlomo Zalman, all of the Machmirim, they use the Shach, L'chumra. They say that even though, in other words, if you go with the Shach, the definition of Bishul, that takes away the issue of a guy moving it, is if it evaporates. So the pasteurization of wines don't evaporate it. So they're machmer because of it. I just know that Reb Hershel Schachter is more lenient. You have many poskim in America that are very lenient, and based on them, the OU will say ayin mevushal. I want you to know.
Wine from Israel that says non-mevushal, that's really mevushal.
Well, based on American standards. The only thing is that we say that once the Rabban and Paskin, we give some ruchnizik power to a consensus that since the standard in Israel is higher than here, once they decided it's Ein Mevushal, we're not going to go ahead and become Oiber Chachamim. I'm just saying that's the regular approach. The Gabbai in his heart is thinking, I know Danny. And he's thinking, okay, if there's a need, if there's a tzorech mitzvah or something, And maybe it's not wrong, but you have to be very careful with those.
Could be like the wine here, which is not really the
And Dan is saying, the Litvak is saying the opposite, that the yayin mevushal is a problem. I'm on his side. I'm on your team, Dan. You got a problem. On the other hand, you can say once the Rabbanim paskind, and I take back what I said. Once the OU that's Yiddishkeit. We give a lot of power to a consensus. Once they paskind mevushal, we can say mevushal. That's the way. That will be what I would do. Okay, let's read it inside. Says the Gemara that indeed, what's the psak? And that's the way I was saying that we paskin like Rabbi Yechanan, that Yehuda ben Kini, in the name of Rav Imi, in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, who many times argues with Rabbi Yechanan, says that the reason behind whichever one that was machmer mipnei shemamate mishasaisov. In other words, evaporation is not the issue. And by the way, if we paskin this way, if evaporation is not relevant, then pasteurization will make it mevushal. What's the psak? It's not about evaporation. Evaporation. Did you cook it? Did you not cook it? And I have no doubt that now there's another. I don't know all of the details. It could be even when it comes to the pasteurization. That if someone can check, there are different temperatures. Because I know by wine, there's some living part of the wine that gets killed when you cook it, and pasteurization can happen with different temperatures. I know this is a big issue. Cooking is 212. They don't go to 212. They go to 175. They go to a certain temperature because they want to cover the health purposes for pasteurizing it with the minimum amount of heat without killing, I don't know what that's called, those living bacteria. So that's another issue, separate of what I'm talking about. No, it's even if you're going to say that you don't have to go with the shach. It doesn't have to, even if it doesn't evaporate because it's done in a pipe. You're capturing everything. You're not losing anything. It's still called bishul. There still might be a certain level of heat under which halachically we won't say bishul. That's a big issue when it comes to the kasherization of the milk plants between the chalav akum and chalav Yisrael. They kasher it. What temperature do they bring it up to? I know this used to be a big machlokes between Rav Zalman Shimon and Dvarkin. It was very stringent. And now that it's late, let's go weiter. But this is
all wine in control. It's not mevushal, somewhat mevushal.
Probably, yes.
Because that all wine almost in the world today has been pasteurized. If you hold pasteurization is
basically all wine is. But Ito, I think the takeaway from today is that there's two halachic issues. Number one is, since it doesn't evaporate, maybe that's not called bishul. Okay, that we got. That's old. When it comes to the temperature, even if it's called bishul, it has to reach a certain temperature. This is also, many years ago, this is a big machlokes. Okay, next Mishnah, fruit juices, and let's see how far we can get there. Let's go weiter. So the Mishnah is just giving an example. I want you to know it's about all fruit juices. Now, don't confuse this with the general machlokes as to what it has to be tithed biblically. And according to many Rishonim, Rashi and Tosfos, fruits b'chlal only have to be tithed rabbinically. Don't let that get in the way with our Mishnah. It's separate. Whether it's doiraisa or the rabbanan fruits or not, you have the Ravid. The Ravid says that all fruits, they don't have to be tithed, but if you tithe them, then it's truma doiraisa. Rashi Tosfos says it's only midrabanan. The Rambam says all fruits have to be tithed doiraisa that grow in Israel, independent of it. Now we're talking about fruit juices. Now, guys, there are two fruit juices. The Mishnah is speaking about both. Either someone separated, they had tomatim, they had dates, they separated whatever the 2% is as truma, and then someone squeezed them into honey. So the honey is coming from a already trumad date. Or someone had dates, they did not separate truma, which was wrong, because midrabanan, you have to separate truma from dates. They turned their dates into honey. Then they say, ooh, I forgot. So now they separated lechatchila truma on the honey. Either or. Machloikes, whether truma is chal on fruit juices. Dvash tomarim. Another example will be yayin tapuchin. Yayin tapuchin is apple cider. Or chometz sisvaniyos. Sisvaniyos are grapes that are small and unripe, and they are left on the trees and they are harvested in winter because they're not getting ripe and they're going to freeze. But since they're very small and unripe, they are generally only used to make vinegar. Just examples. Now, this is important because wine and oil has to be tithed midoiraisa. Lakula alma. So we're speaking about fruit juices that are not wine and oil, or usha'ar kol mei pedishal truma. Either or, you separated the fruits, now you have the juices, or you separated on the juices. So Rabbi Eliezer is of the opinion that they are so truma that if a non-kohen ate it, remember the whole sugya aviv, b'shoigeg, you got to pay by keren v'chaimish. It's incorrect to say that keren v'chaimish is only on truma d'oraisa. We already went through this. But on the Rabbanans, there are different levels of the Rabbanans. Sometimes you pay the chaimish on a rabbinic, and sometimes you don't do that. Rabbi Eliezer holds that it's mamish like a normal truma de Rabbanan, and therefore mechayev keren v'chaimish. Rabbi Yeshua will hold that what that Zajac test on the base that you don't have to poiter. What does poiter mean? Look inside the Mara folder. Rabbi Yeshua poiter mechaimish. Not that Rabbi Yeshua says it's nothing, even though we'll see in the Gemara another possibility. But he's already saying that Rabbi Yeshua holds you gave it to the kohen, you can't steal from the kohen, but the din of a chaimish is not aval keren chayiv. And even according to Rabbi Yeshua says the maraful the lachatchila surim lezara. Now I know that it's late, but I want to go back to that Zajac Tesam Adal. This is so important. And when we learned this, I remember schwitzing over this. But I'm going in the Rashi Ilio around 8 lines from the top. And I'm going to read it in English by heart because it's late, but this is very important. First of all, by Bikurim, in Parshas Kisavai, there is an extra word, tavi, that Chazal learn that if someone did not put the Bikurim themselves in the basket, but they turned them into fruit juices, then they remembered, it came from Bikurim, they are equally obligated to bring it into the Beis HaMikdash. In other words, Vadai Bikurim goes equal on fruits and on its juices. Number 2, he brings up words that we have in Parshas Re'eh, that when it says, Reishes Bikurei Admascha Tavi Beis Hashem Aleikecha, that we use that, I'm sorry, when it says in Parshas Re'eh, Utrumas Yodecha, the word Trumas Yodecha that has to be brought to the temple means Bikurim. We find in the Torah the word Truma for Bikurim. So there is a hekesh between Bikurim and Truma. Rabbi Eliezer Oimer, Don Mina Umina. First of all, we are Makish Truma to Bikurim. And then we go all the way. Just like by Bikurim is equal fruits, equal to the juices. We are makish truma to bikurim, so whatever standard truma has, doiraisa, the rabbanan, it equally goes on the juices. That's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yeshua says, I agree with you that there is a hekesh between truma and bikurim. Doin mina, but you don't go all the way. You are makish it, and what's the hekesh? Now, by bikurim, the rule is that juices of any of the 7 are equally chayv to be brought to the Beis HaMikdash. By Truma, the only juices that are included in the Dinei Truma is wine and oil. So all that we can learn from Bikurim is that if someone separated Truma either on the grapes and then he squeezed them into wine, or on the olives into oil, or he did it lachatchil on the wine or the oil, that they are equal Truma. That juices, but doin minova oike ba'asra, you have to use the rule as the Torah already specified in the din of Truma. So therefore, Rabbi Yeshua holds that there is no truma by fruit juices. Now, if there's no truma, we have to understand why the Marafulda says, but you have to do something, you have to pay back the keren, we'll leave that for the Gemara. Let's go weiter. Now that we had this argument, the Mishnah has another machlekes that's related regarding juices between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Now, we already learned many, many, many times that the 7 liquids that we remember what they are from the Namanik, Yad, Shachadam, Yayin, Devash, Shemen, Cholov, Kal, and Yad Shachadam, Dam, and Mayim, these are the 7 liquids, they render food susceptible to becoming tummy. No one debates that. Question in our Mishnah is, does other liquids become tummy if something tummy had contact with it? If it could acquire tumah, then if it becomes tummy, it will also impart tumah. Or only the 7 liquids that could be machshir could become and could convey. And all other liquids, not only can they not be machshir, they never acquire tumah, and therefore they never impart tumah. Machlokes Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer mitame mishum mashka. All fruit juices can also become tummy. Amar Rabbi Yeshua, limano chachamim sheva mashkin. Kemoini patomim. Why did the sages keep on enumerating Yad Shach Adam? Everyone is reviewing the 7. Why? Just because they're spice peddlers that like just listing items? No, they're not doing it for that. Now, Rabbi Eliezer will say, yeah, they mentioned them because Ledin Hechsher Oicholin. But Rabbi Yeshua says, no. Elo Omru Shiva Mashkin Tamim. The Chazal are trying to tell you only the 7 liquids are even subject to Tumah. V'shar kol mashkin never become tummy. The other liquids, not only can they not render food susceptible, they never acquire, and they never impart. Okay, now we're going back to the first machlokes. Says the Gemara, have a boy member. They wanted to say in the yeshiva, and this is something that we're going to question tomorrow, share. But we begin to say, ma pligin, that this is the marafulda. What's the only machlokes, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua? They spoke about the chaimish. Rabbi Eliezer mechayiv keren l'chaimish. Rabbi Yeshua says the words poiter. What does poiter mean? We don't know what it means. It can mean you don't have to pay anything, or you don't have to pay the chaimish. So they only argued regarding the chaimish, like the marafut. Avol bekenen. But if someone had fruit juices that was for a coin and a non-coin consumed it, af Rabbi Yeshua moide, that you got to pay the keren. Now, if that is true, so now we have to understand ma pligin. What's the machlekes? Another machlekes or another qualification. That's only lisha avar. That's only if one already consumed it, then you don't have to. Rabbi Yeshua says you don't have to pay the chaimish. It goes together. Since you have to pay the keren, Rabbi Yeshua is not telling you that fruit juice is not truma on any level. Rabbi Yeshua is not saying that a non-kohen can have it. Lechatchila af Rabbi Yeshua moida that what? That midrabanan, on some level, fruit juices share the same law as fruit themselves. So is what the Hava boy in Meimar, what the Bnei Yeshiva understood the Mishnah. And this asks the Gemara, hold on, utanina, but we learned in a Brayso, Dvash Tamarim, Deir Hani, Rabbi Eliezer Mechayev b'Maisrois. What are we talking about? Doin mino, right? That same thing. You got to separate Maiser on Deir Hani. Rabbi Yeshua Poiter. Now, what does it mean, poiter? He's saying you don't even have to separate it. Now, if he's saying you don't have to separate maisris on date honey, then does that not mean that if you did it, what you did is nothing? And if that would be the case, in other words, if you're not obligated to do it, then l'chura, even if someone did it, what he did is not a halachic deed. There's no chalois truma. So why would you not even l'chatchila be allowed to have it? Kasha. Answers the Gemara, we're still keeping the Hava boy in Meimar. I'll tell you, our Gemara is speaking about Shezavu Mishenitbelu. In other words, fruit became tevel. When once there is a chiyuv to separate maisres on the fruits, if from that point they oozed out liquid or you squeezed out liquid, that is where we are holding our grounds by saying that even according to Rabbi Yeshua, midrabanan, the juices are truma. But the Braisa that we just quoted, that says that Rabbi Yeshua doesn't even tell you have to do it, he's speaking about juices that flowed out of the fruits prior to them becoming subject to maisres, before their gemar malacha. So if there was never a chiyuv on the source, on the fruit, and you squeezed it out, here, even lechatchila, you don't have to separate it. And if someone said it's truma, these words are nonsense, and a chanami, and a non-kohen can eat it. Okay, now, another thing the Gemara wants to make clear, that there is a machlokes tanoim. What is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer? The Gemara is going to quote Rab Nosson, but the Chachamim argue with him, and the Gemara is trying to say that our Mishnah Vadai is not Rab Nosson. Our understanding is not Rab Nosson's understanding in Rabbi Eliezer. We learned in a Braisa Rab Nosson limits the understanding in Rabbi Eliezer. That loy should Rabbi Eliezer machayev b'maisres. P. Ella, Rabbi Eliezer says, shelo yoichel min dvash at sheya'aser ala tmorim marasayin. Was if you did not separate truma, not even on the dates, and then you had honey coming from it. If you're going to eat the honey without separating maisres, someone will think that you can have the dates without separating truma from maisres. So because of marasayin, you have to separate truma. That's a different understanding. That means that even if the issue is only marasayin, let me say one thing. Now, to go at kedei kach that you have to pay a choimish is amazing. But that's the whole point. That the Gemara is saying that according to Rab Nassan's understanding of Rabbi Eliezer never would have said that a non-kohen who ate the honey will have to pay a chaimish. Something that has to be done only because of maras ayin does not demand a chaimish. Now, another din, if it's only because of maras ayin, moed Rabbi Eliezer leniently she'im iser ala tamarim, that if a person had dates, guys, this is what happened, and he did not yet separate trumas u'maisers, and he squeezed some of them into honey. And then he remembers, I didn't separate trumas u'maisers. Since the whole issue was only maras ayin, when you separate, what do you have to separate for? Only for the dates. How many dates did I have? Let's say I had 100 dates. I had 100 dates. 2% is 2 dates. And if you separate it now, even though you already extracted the honey, even though you're not calculating how much honey, it's going to be good. Even if the honey is Pamya, it's in Spain, it's in a different location. In other words, you're not separating dates on dates and honey on honey. Even according to Rabbi Eliezer, you can have the dvash. Mil Amra, we're going to go with this girsa, Shuhu ma'asir min atmarim ala dvash, that even when you are ma'asir on the dates, for the dates and the honey, you don't have to calculate the measure of the honey at all, even according to Rabbi Eliezer. The whole thing is only marasayin, only lefi atmarim. We're going to go with the girsa of the Gra. The next few lines are omitted. Daf kuf on the top. Mil Amra. Now, all based on this is Rab Nassan. Guys, daf kuf. That the Chachamim or the Tanakama of Rab Nassan, they understand Rabbi Eliezer the way our Mishnah understands Rabbi Eliezer. Now that our Mishnah says that Rabbi Eliezer says you have to pay a chaimish, which means you're takar chayiv to separate truma from the honey. So if you forgot to do it in an earlier stage and now you're doing it later, you have to calculate both the dates. You have to calculate the tmarim. It's not sufficient to just separate dates on dates. You got to do it for both. And our Mishnah follows the Tanakama, which is why the Mishnah says you have to pay a chaimish. At Khan, the understanding of Machlokes, Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua. Again, Rabbi Yeshua also was moida that there's some chalois din, not Rab Nassan. Our Mishnah is Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Eliezer is mamish machmer. Rabbi Yeshua says you don't have to pay a chaimish, and to be continued tomorrow.